Hi,
Okay.
everyone. Welcome to the Seattle Angel Conference Workshop Series. Today we have Dana Robinson working on the question of how to make your pitch more effective with investors. This is in the context of the Seattle Angel Conference. Number 26 is underway, and the transatlantic version just started this morning. And so the goal is to get early pre-seed companies to have a perspective about what the pitch process looks like and how to be better at it. Dana, would you like to let me add you here? Lovely to see you. Thanks so much for doing all of this great work with us.
It's my pleasure. Okay, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. I love these events. Okay, so I'm Dana Sather Robinson. So I'm your friendly neighborhood pitch trainer, angel investor, and I'm a presentation skills trainer as well. So if you want to improve your pitch, you're in the right place. And I love that we have people here from around the world. Not everybody said where they were at. So if everybody could just put in the chat where you're calling in from. This is one of the great benefits of Zoom calls is that we've got people from all over the world. And I think that that's wonderful. I meet a lot of founders who are not confident in their current pitch. I meet founders who say they're confused about how to connect to investors. And I meet founders who say they're frustrated that founders don't seem to really fully listen. They're not getting it when they're done with the pitch. It feels like they're either not listening or just not understanding. So if you ever get frustrated about your pitch or you're confused about how to manage it, you are in the right place. Here's some things that you need to have a great pitch and to connect with investors. You need to have a really clear pitch narrative. And you need to have a memorable pitch deck that supports your narrative. And you need to have engaging pitching skills. Today, we're going to talk about the third one, engaging pitching skills. Last time I did one of these talks, we talked about a memorable pitch deck. So I think it's on YouTube if you missed that one. Right now, I want to really focus on engaging pitching skills because they are important. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about how to keep investors engaged when you're speaking and how to set yourself up for success by preparing for your pitch and preparing for that delivery. And I'll talk about some key mistakes I see all the time so you know to avoid them. I really love this topic. I've seen a lot of pitches and I've seen lots of ways that people can improve. So I really love particularly this topic on being engaging. And here's why. When I look at a pitch, I'm wearing two hats. I'm listening as an angel investor. I'm a member of E8 Angels, and I go to lots of other events, including SAC and other angel groups, or I'm invited to be a pitch judge at events all the time, either online or in person. So I see a lot of pitches. But I'm also a presentation skills trainer with 2 decades of experience of training people in different I've lived in Asia and Europe and the US. So I've trained people in different cultures and countries and various industries. So when I wear my trainer hat as I'm listening to pitches, I notice things. I notice how people are communicating and what they're doing when something really works. And I notice exactly what they're doing when something's not working. So that's why I started pitch training, so that I can help you understand what to do to make it work and what to avoid so that you are more effective. I'm going to take this slide down now so that we can really, because this is all about connecting and engaging. So this will be much easier if we're not staring at slides, which means I encourage you to take notes and, jot down the notes that you want to talk about. We will have time for Q&A at the end. In fact, we've built in lots of time for discussion. So please think about questions you want to ask. Here's why today is important. delivering an engaging pitch is just as important as having a great pitch deck. So if you're putting all your effort and preparation into your deck, you're missing an opportunity to connect with potential investors. Speaking in a compelling way that's engaging is the best way to connect to an audience. And therefore, you need to have an engaging pitch as much as you need to have a great deck. And the problem is that the deck is such a big focus, which is why I think it's important to talk about these soft skills that are actually really hard. A big mistake that I see all the time is that founders are just focused on their deck when they're preparing for their pitch. And that's where they put all of their time and energy. And of course, this is understandable because everyone talks to you about a pitch deck. Investors will tell you what they expect in a pitch deck. If you research investor pitch online, what do you get? You'll get deck templates or deck outlines. So nobody is telling you that you also need to be engaging. And they don't warn you that if you're boring and you're talking to slides, that we stop listening. But that's what happens. So the thing is, it's really important to be engaging when you're pitching to investors. And here's why. Investors don't invest in decks. They invest in people. They invest in teams that they have confidence in their capability and in their commitment. And investors invest in people that they know and like and trust. In fact, I ask VCs about this all the time, and a VC recently told me, we only invest in founders with great communication skills. And another one told me, communication skills are really important to deal with investors, with customers, and with team members. And when I'm in investor meetings, well, we get together and we discuss companies that we like. I often hear investors say things like, wow, I really like him. Or I love that team. Or gosh, she's an amazing founder. I have never once heard an investor say, I love that deck, I'm in. So investors do notice when someone makes a great impression. And if your pitching skills are not that great, then this is what happens. Like it's a problem. It's a problem because I've seen boring pitches where people are talking to their slides, not investors, or they talk too fast or too slow. And here's the risk. If your pitch is boring or not engaging or confusing, is that investors stop listening. And when people kind of, when it's hard to listen, they get distracted. They might be like, oh, I got a text message, and they pick up their phone. So you're competing with a lot of distractions. And if investors are distracted, they won't remember your message, and therefore they won't remember you. And I've been in these investor discussions where it's, a few days after we've heard a whole bunch of pitches, and somebody will be talking about a company and somebody will say, I didn't get it. I didn't get their business model. Or worse, somebody will be like, oh, remind me what they do? Or who is that? Who was that? This happens all the time. Investors admit that they don't remember a pitch, and it might be only a few days later. So it's really important for you to be remembered if you're going to get invited to a follow-up meeting. My goal for you is that you will be remembered. That if an investor that was at your pitch is talking to, a few days later to their investment partner or their boss, and that they will remember what they do and why they like you. So that's our goal. The problem is that this is not easy, because unfortunately, most pitches are not that memorable. I'm really sorry to say this, but it's the truth. I'll give you an example. Think of a presentation that you saw in the last few months. Okay, typical PowerPoint with slides, 20 minutes, and you're watching the presentation and listening. Okay, you get it. Then a week later, someone says to you, hey, how was that presentation? I'm sorry I missed it. And you go, oh, yeah, they did a great job. It was good. Well, what did they say? How much would you remember a week later of a typical PowerPoint presentation, of the content, percentage-wise? Put that in the chat. Like, tell the truth. Would be 10%, 5%, 20%, 30%. Or did you have a photographic memory? It would be more. Like, what do you think you would realistically remember of the key content of a typical presentation? I would like to see some numbers in the chat. Okay, we've got anything from 2 to 25. Lisa must have a photographic memory. She says 50. It must be really interesting. Okay, so I ask this question a lot because I'm curious, and it's a good gauge. The most common answer I get is somewhere between 5 and 10%. And today we've got everything from 2 to 50. So this is normal. Okay, that we remember this small amount of a typical presentation. The thing is they put a lot of work into that presentation, and we remember so little. But this is normal. So I want you to really up that. I want people to remember you, at least those key ideas. And because this is important, being remembered is crucial. If you're going to be invited back, if people are going to advocate for you and say, hey, we should meet with this company, they need to remember why they like you. So if the pitch is way more than the deck, right, how should you use this deck? I want you to keep in mind, your pitch deck is not the pitch. Your deck is a visual support tool that helps you communicate your story. And it can make it more impactful by communicating in a visual way. The pitch deck, don't get me wrong, the pitch deck's important and it serves a purpose. A great deck might get you a meeting for an initial pitch. And during your pitch, the deck can really add a lot of impact to your message. But if investors stop listening to you, they will not remember you and you will not get invited back. That's just the way it is. So delivering an engaging pitch is just as important as having a great deck. What can you do to improve your pitch? There's a lot, that might have sounded a bit grim about being remembered, but there's a lot of things you can do to improve. So what can founders do to improve? There are some key mindsets that will really help with this. The first mindset is that anybody can improve their communication skills. Pitching and presenting are skills that can be improved with coaching and practice. It's like any other skill or sport or hobby or learning an instrument, right? If you and I decided we're going to enter a tennis tournament in a couple months, we would need to practice. And I'm not very good at tennis. I played a long time ago. So I would require some coaching and some practice to get up to scratch to play doubles with anybody. And if you wanted to learn an instrument, you can't just read about it. You would have to practice it to get better. So communicating is just like that. I mean, think of a TED Talk that you've seen that you think that's really good. Great TED Talks are easy to listen to. And I can promise you it takes hours and hours of practice to sound that conversational. So it's important to practice. Practice till your pace is relaxed and you're comfortable with eye contact. For example, I've seen some founders who were really not naturally good at pitching. They were not comfortable pitching. They didn't like being on stage or even on camera. And I've seen them make a huge improvement in a short amount of time. I worked with one founder in particular who talked way too fast, and he crammed in a lot of information in his pitch. And it was actually really difficult to understand what the business did. So we spent a little time working on that, and with some training and some awareness on where to improve and practice, he improved dramatically. Okay, it wasn't perfect, but we could understand what he did, and he came across as likable and credible and sincere. So that's a win compared to the previous version. Anyone can improve their pitching skills, whether you're naturally good at it or you think you're naturally pretty bad at it. Whether you love presenting in front of people or you absolutely hate it, you can improve. Don't give up, get some coaching and practice. So here's some guidelines on how you could improve on your own. At the end, I'm going to give you a link to a handout and an app, but we'll do that at the end because right now I want you to be focused and not downloading and trying to type things in. Okay, so here we are. But the first key tip on improving is to practice with no slides and work on being deliberate with your eye contact and pace. And practicing without slides will help you to not be anchored to your slides when you're actually giving your pitch. And as you're practicing, breathe into your belly, right? Give yourself that time to breathe after every sentence, after every phrase. Breathing into your belly will help you feel calmer. Your pace will be more relaxed, and taking breaths into your belly will actually help calm your nerves. The next mindset is be authentic. Think about being authentic when you're pitching, because the focus is on building relationships. Think of your pitch as the beginning of a relationship. Most investors will tell you that the number one influencer in their decision is team or founder. They want to get to know you. So it's important to show your enthusiasm and your personality. You might have heard the golden rule of business. All things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to people that they know and like and trust. And even if things are not equal, we still like to do business with people and refer business to people we know and like and trust. So let them get to know and like and trust you. And part of the thing about building relationships is I want you to manage your expectations. No one ever invests after a first pitch. So the best outcome after your pitch is a meeting. And know that this process will take a while. It's kind of like dating. You want to get to know each other. And like dating, you don't make a commitment after one date, or at least you shouldn't. You want to build rapport and give them some confidence to know and like and trust you. All right, so how can you be in this mindset of being authentic and relationship building? And that is, be willing to show your enthusiasm and your personality. If you're committed to your business and you're motivated by your mission, and you're making a positive impact on the world or your industry, show it. Like, you are doing something hard and bold, and it's going to take motivation and commitment and passion. So you have to show that you have those things. Reading from slides and talking too quickly or talking too slowly does not show passion. And you want to build these relationships. So relationships matter. Let them know that you are committed. Okay, third mindset that will really help you in your delivery is to be investor focused. And what I mean by investor focused is that your pitch content and your delivery is focused on your listeners, on your potential investors, which means you talk about what's important to them and you're talking to them, not to your slides. Okay, so sometimes people have asked me, well, how can I be investor focused, but I'm also supposed to be authentic and be me? And here's a really good way to get in this investor focused mindset and still be authentic, is to think of your pitch as a gift. You're gifting investors this pitch, this opportunity, but not in an arrogant way. So think of it as if you're buying a gift for a close friend. So let's say you have a really close friend who's getting married. And you're going to think of something that they like. And you decide, I'm going to be different and buy a gift not off the wedding list, but something that's uniquely from me. So you're still going to think of something that's meaningful to them, that they would like. But you're going to deliver it with care so that they receive it. You're also going to make sure it's something that's unique to you, so they remember in 10 years that you gave that gift to them. An investor pitch is like that. You're going to create content that's meaningful to them, deliver it in a way that's engaging so they get it, but still show your personality. Okay, so the content part of how to have investor-focused content, the main thing that you can do is to describe your business concisely. And I know that this is hard because you have the unique problem of knowing too much, right? You're an expert and you're enthusiastic and you want us to know everything about your business. But this is the beginning of a relationship, right? It's kind of like dating. You don't tell somebody everything about yourself on the first date. So start with the concise version. Keep them curious and leave them wanting more. The key thing is, as you're preparing your pitch, is that you want to make it easy for investors to remember you. So that needs to be concise. One tip is that it's really important to practice this and prepare. So as you're preparing your concise information that's investor focused in your pitch, is to keep in mind that you're probably going to be a bit nervous when you're pitching. So you want to set yourself up for success. And the best way to do that is to have a clear and concise messaging and plan it out so it's easy to deliver and take notes. Because if you're nervous, the worst thing that you can do is try to have your pitch memorized. There's so much bad information out there, and this is one of them. I've seen people say, you must memorize your pitch. That is absolute garbage. If you're nervous, you will now be more nervous because you're going to worry about forgetting something. So don't try to memorize. Have notes separate from your slides and practice from those first. Practice eye contact. Practice your pace. But using your notes prevents you from forgetting something really important. So two key things to know about nerves. When adrenaline hits, and it will. The two things that it affects the most are, first is that sense of our logic, which is why people sometimes forget something when they're on stage. And the next one is timing, which is why people tend to talk really fast when they're presenting. I remember I was at a big event and I was sitting at the same table as the keynote speaker. And he was so engaging and so interesting. This guy was an expert in his field. And I thought, I just can't wait for his talk because he's such an interesting guy. And he got up there and it was a muddled mess. He got nervous. He lost track of what he was talking about. He went off on a tangent. I couldn't understand, like, it was confusing. And he talked too fast and then he repeated himself. It was a disaster. If he had just had notes and practiced on his timing to make sure that what he prepared for was fit into the allotted time, he wouldn't have tried to cram in so much information that it became a mess. So prepare and practice will set you up for success. So to be more effective at pitching, you also need to improve your communication skills so that you're engaging. And go in with this relationship mindset so that you are ready to connect to investors and build those relationships. And then practice that investor-focused delivery so that you're authentic and people are getting to know you. Okay, how can you learn more? I have some resources for you. I'm going to share them. This, first of all, is a handout on Deliver with Impact. This will give you some really good reminders and tips so that when you're practicing, you can really work on that delivery and keep improving. And it does take practice. Okay, so does everybody have that? Give me a thumbs up if you've got it. Excellent. Okay, I can come back to it if we need to. Second, this is the best practice app that I've ever seen. This is Udly.ai. They're based in Seattle. And it helps you to practice, and it will give you feedback on both the content and the delivery. I met the founder of Udly before it was even called Udly, just as he was developing it, and he wanted feedback on his app. So some of those features in there are based on my feedback. I'm really proud of that, particularly the one on pausing and pace. So how it works is you practice your pitch and you record it. Practice without slides, right? You need to shine when you're on stage. So you record it, and then at the end of your recording, you will be able to see the video. You will get a transcript, and then it will give you feedback on the content, on if it needs to be more concise. And the AI feature will actually give you ideas on how to make something better. And there's also a tab on the analytics on your delivery, which will tell you if you're talking too slow or too fast, if you've paused, how's your pace, if you have eye contact, and it will give you, and if you have this habit of filler words, it will tell you how many filler words. So if you've got 20 filler words in your 2-minute pitch, you know you need to practice on not using those. So it's a great app for practicing. I have the enterprise version for my clients so that I can create scenarios very specific to their situation and type of investor and how much time they have. But for this, it's more geared for presentations. It's still great. If you get their annual, or if you sign up for the paid version, use that code and you'll get a discount. And connect, like follow me on LinkedIn. I give lots of videos on LinkedIn. I post all the time on things that I've learned from other investors that help founders understand what they need to do to improve their pitch. I also do events like this, and I have live training with clients. We're in small groups or one-on-one. So connect and let me know if I can help. With that, going to put that back up in case you missed it. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I have so much, like I could have talked for 2 hours, but I realized that that would go completely against what I teach. So I tried to keep it very concise, the short version, so you get the overview of what you need to do. And now I'd love to discuss more. So who wants to ask a question?
Maybe it would be good to see people's faces. and
Okay,
you could lower the screen.
okay. Hi, everybody. So raise your hand if you have a question. Oh, we have one already. Dory.
Hi, sorry that I came in late, but this is really helpful information. I have some conflicting feedback on my pitches, and probably because I heard feedback from the first and leaned too heavily. So more specifically, I was told that I had a good hook, but then they weren't really sure what my solution was. So kind of describing the problem, but really defining the solution. In my follow-up pitch, I was told I spent too much time on the product, on the solution. So, finding the right balance if you have a short amount of time, any, sort of suggestions there, if do you think it's more about finding what resonates with people and then being succinct about the solution, or what's been your...
Yeah, so here's the thing when you're talking to investors. If you ask 5 different investors for feedback on your pitch, you will probably get 5 different answers. So it does get a little bit confusing. But that feedback's really valuable, as that if you're leaning too heavily on like talking too much about your product, keep in mind investors are investing in your business. They're not customers for your product. So you probably do need to keep it more about your business, which I think is why pitch deck formats originated, is people didn't want a sales pitch. They wanted you to talk about problem and solution and market opportunity and your business model before you get too deep into product features. So that's really important. And if you can map out your pitch plan and all right, here's the number one thing when you're preparing this content is don't open up a template and start filling in slides. First, plan it like a storyboard, whether if you have a whiteboard, use that, or post-it notes across the wall, or big sheets of paper. Plan your pitch so that it makes sense to your ideal investor. And that way, when you practice it, it'll be easier to tell, does this make sense? And will this be easy to tell as a story, as if I'm in a conversation with investors? So that content will actually help you deliver better if the content is nice and concise and in the order of what makes sense to investors.
Thank you.
Geet, did I say that right?
Yes, Gita.
Gita, nice to meet you.
So first of all, I love you demonstrate the solution because of your pace of your voice and the calmness of the delivery. And you spot on. One of my biggest problems when I pitch is that I want to tell it all. I'm really so excited about everything that we've done, and I don't, I can't get all that across in, a minute or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. What I've done is to test it on my husband, and he's pretty brutal. He's ex Wall Street and science curious, but he's not a scientist, and that helps a lot because he basically beats it up. When I work with him, it's clear, I sometimes have to start somewhere else in order to get, especially people without a scientific background, up to speed with what I'm doing. And that's super helpful. I've been pitching to very mixed audiences, and it's important that everybody can follow the
Exactly.
story.
Yeah.
Uh,
Did you have a
so-
question, Geeta?
So my question is, in a lot, and you didn't do that, so maybe it's in some of the other information. Um, do you have a template for what you talked about a storyboard, but you know the pitch deck has certain ding 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 things you have to hit. Do you have a, your favorite storyboard for a presentation? Because this is different, right?
Yeah, so when I work with clients, I have a lot of tools that help them, and it depends on their situation. So I have a template for creating a storyboard of a pitch. And I also have a template for creating like a very simple presentation that can be adaptable to different situations if it's not really a pitch. The thing is that I had to adapt my training when I started working with founders, because a typical presentation format is very different than a typical pitch format, because a pitch is very specific to what investors want. And so it is important that you do that brainstorming and planning around the things that investors might want: product, solution, market opportunity, the business model, the team, that kind of thing. But it's also all of those skills and presentation skills and those methods still are really helpful, because it's to focus in on what's most important and what's the main message around each section of the pitch, and being able to deliver that concisely and clearly at a nice pace. And I find that technical founders or scientists, often they're trying to give too much of the science background when really we don't want that. I saw a pitch a few weeks ago, and it kind of turned into a physics lesson, which at the time I understood it. But then the next day when somebody was asking me about, oh, did you like that one? I was like, yeah, but I could not tell you what he said. So it was not memorable. Whereas if it had focused more on the business, I would have remembered it. And then you save that science conversation for a follow-up meeting. So this is where we're trying to find that right balance between how cool is your product, and I know you're excited about it, but investors want to understand, how is this business going to grow? How are you going to reach your customers? And like, what's the opportunity there? So it's trying to get more in the head of investors rather than, I want them to understand my science. That just is not going to work in a first pitch. It will work in the follow-up meeting when they bring in their tech people. So I hope that helps. I want to get to the next person's question. Thank you, Geeta. Great to meet you. John, is Jisha next? I'm only looking at the pictures. I don't have the participants list. Yes. Did I say that right? Jisha?
Yes, you did actually. Thank you. Yes. I have
Hi.
a question. I have my first presentation that's very meaningful to me on Thursday, the 26th, up in Seattle. And I was wondering if you may please share what you believe is either the opening of the presentation or what I should really focus on. Perhaps you have mentioned it before, but being my first presentation that means so much to me. Personality, I have. Confidence in speaking in front of others, I have. I've been practicing with Toastmasters for about 2 months. But what should I focus my speech on? What should I open? Is it like 3 key things that investors are looking for? What should
I
I
think, yeah,
focus?
absolutely. And I mean, and depending on how much time you have, let's say you have maybe 5 or
minutes.
10 minutes. Oh, 8 minutes. There you go.
Yes.
And that amount of time, you really want us, everybody should always start their pitch with something that sets the scene. And I like for people to start with that 1 sentence statement of what it is you do so we understand. So a hook that has that clarity of what you're trying to do or explains what you are. Without that, then sometimes launching into that problem solution is confusing if we don't have that context. So a hook, and then 1 or 2, 3 or 3 things that is going to be most interesting to investors. And those 2 or 3 things that are most interesting to investors are not your product. It might be that you have an amazing team that people are going to want to throw money at when they understand how experienced and you are with your unique expertise. It might be that you're solving a huge problem, or that this market is being disrupted and it's ripe for change, and your product is in there. If you can narrow down really concisely a couple things that are going to get investors' attention, that's a great intro. So I challenge you all, as you're practicing, to practice, an elevator pitch of 1 or 2 minutes and not talk about your product. It's really hard. But of course, when you're pitching, you will explain your product. But if you can train yourself to talk about your business, then when you start off, you're not going to accidentally slip into product details, because that kind of bores investors if they're not potential customers. So good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lisa.
Hey, I'd like to ask about follow-up. So what is the proper thing to do if someone is very enthusiastic about your pitch, says, oh, you're going to get another meeting, and then crickets, and you do a nice little thing where you give them a PDF of your pitch deck and say, oh, when would you like to have this follow-up? And nothing. So how persistent versus when to dismiss?
All right, so yeah, there's no magic answer, Lisa, but here's a difficult fact, is that investors only invest in a fraction of the teams that they see, a tiny fraction. It was with John. We hosted I was moderating a panel with 3 different investors, 3 VCs, and like one of them admitted that they get hundreds of decks a month. They meet with people that are within their thesis, and of those, only a really small amount get onto due diligence. And then of those, they maybe invest in 10 or 12 a year, of a whole year. So that means, like, out of all these hundreds that they see a month, they'll invest in maybe 1. So it's pretty tough odds. So if somebody's ghosting you, maybe they got busy, maybe they've found something else that excites them more. Like, you can be polite and do that follow-up, but after 3 emails, you just have to wait and see if they come back to you.
Okay,
I'm sorry. It's just the facts. Like, sometimes people are enthusiastic in the moment, and then but they're not. People don't make investment decisions by themselves. They usually have an investment partner, or they'll do due diligence with their angel group, or they defer to their boss or their investment committee. And maybe they went back to somebody and said, hey, you should meet this founder. I think they're interesting. And that person will say, we've already got somebody in that industry in our portfolio. We can't. And that's it. Like, so you don't know what's going on behind the scene.
One of the secrets that is underutilized is that when you have that conversation and you sent them things and there was a positive response, ask them if you can put them on your investor updates mailing list. And then every month, send them a well-written, concise, clear investor update. And now you've got this background thing that's always bringing them in. So if the reason that you didn't get selected was repairable, as in they're just too busy and they need to come back to it later, then that'll bring it to the top on a regular basis. And if it is not repairable, like we already have a competitor, then they'll just unsubscribe, and then you know the answer.
Samha? How do you say that?
Sami,
Sami, nice to meet you.
nice to meet you as well. I got 2 quick questions. First one is, what do you recommend we should do in the first 10 seconds? Inspire, or inform or make them feel our pain? How do we open, which is the most striking way to open the pitch? And the second question is, there are founders, I belong to those founders that will do anything and everything possible to make their startup successful. So giving this message, does it scare them off, or does it actually make them more convinced about yourself?
Okay, so first of all, the thing you're trying to do when you first talk to investors is keep their attention and set the scene in a way that they understand. So it's at first like gain that understanding and hook their attention. So you start with a hook. You want to either inspire or motivate or make them excited at the end, and that depends on your industry, right? If you're an impact founder, you want to inspire them. If you're going to make a lot of money, get them excited. So that's going to vary, but at the beginning, get their attention. And then, oh, sorry, the second question was?
Second question was, the founder is almost
committed.
obsessed about being successful, too committed. So
Okay.
does this scare them off?
So investors like to invest in founders who show commitment, because starting a business is hard. And if people are absolutely committed because they've either felt the pain, they have personal experience with the pain, they know they're motivated because they're trying to save the world, or they understand the problem because of their industry experience, whatever that is, show commitment. Because if people are just like, oh, I have this idea and I think it'll make a lot of money and I'll just throw it out there and see if investors want to support it, investors can tell that they're just kind of testing the waters. But if somebody's absolutely committed, that will get investors interested. When you say they're too committed that they'll do anything, like that might be a little obsessive. But so I don't know where that line is, but showing commitment and why you started this business and why you're committed is really helpful to show investors that you're serious about it. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Scott.
Hi.
Hi
Hey,
there.
thanks for the presentation. Two questions real quick. One, I know it's not about the pitch deck itself, but I get conflicting advice as to how many slides, whether or not to add graphics, not graphics. Any tips on that? And then secondly, how much does the progress in the product development, we're in beta right now, and I've had a small exit previously, how much do those play into investors' decisions?
Okay, so all of that's really important. When it comes to your deck, it depends on which deck you're on, right? A teaser deck should be maybe 10 to 16 slides, and with enough information in there that it has complete thoughts so that it explains itself without you there, but not paragraphs, because investors are busy and they're only going to look at it for a few minutes. When you're pitching, you might have between kind of 12 to 20 slides at the most. And that's where you can have some appendix slides for those frequently asked questions. If you have product development, then when you're talking about your product, you can say, this is the stage we are at with product development. And yes, it's important, but product development is less important than the fact that if you have customers. So focus your traction around customer validation. If you have people, if you have customers, if you have a waiting list, if you have letters of intent, those kinds of things are actually more important than how far along your product is, at least in that first pitch. Investors want to see that there's actually a market for this cool thing you're building. If somebody's spent $200,000 building this amazing product, but they don't have customers, that's less exciting than if you just have barely a beta, but you have a waiting list, or you have paid customers, that's better.
Right, thank you.
Good. Yep. Good luck, Scott. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks.
Two quick questions. One, how to position in kind of a niche industry. I mean, we're looked at as, I'm in the golf space, sports tech. It's very hot market, but in a lot of cases, I feel like the investors that aren't golfers or don't know that, maybe they're, able to look at health tech and the other, big markets. And we almost get put in a small category immediately. How is it best to, in the beginning, before you get to the financial part of it, before you get to the business model, how is it best to kind of position that and get their attention right away? Because if they're one of the folks that think golf is small, even though we can get to 100 million in the course of 5-6 years, then we might be one of the presentations that they're not listening to 3 slides in, if you know what I mean. So that's the big question. The other one just is, I've been in some presentations where you get in with the expectation it's kind of a formal pitch, but it's more interactive. And how do you set the stage to know, are they going to start asking questions in slide 1? And we don't control that, I realize, but many of them, most of them let you go through a pitch, but there are some that are just, they start right away. You get 3 slides in an hour, and it was a discussional thing. So is there a way to know better how that works so that you can be more prepared? Or, how do you go about that if there's an answer to that?
Okay, there is an answer to that. And the answer is you need to be prepared for anything. But I'll come to that first. So first, if you are in the golf industry, it is actually to your advantage that there are only certain people interested in the golf industry. If you are talking to investors that don't play golf, that have never invested in golf, there is probably no point in you talking to them. Unless you have a unique technology. Are you tech for golf or product? Yes. Okay.
It's
so unless there's a technology that they like and they're like, oh, you're going to start with golf, that's fine. But this is where knowing who your ideal investor is really, really important. So spend half an hour first creating a profile of your ideal investor. It's just as important to do that when you're starting a fundraise as it is to profile your ideal customer before you start a marketing campaign. So do that ideal investor profile. Think about what industries they invest in, what technologies they invest in, how big of investments do they make based on what you need. And then you're targeting the right people. If this is a huge industry, which I know it is, and a lot of people don't understand that, let's say you're talking to a tech investor, then that might be one of the first that you give your hook, and then you say, this is a huge industry that is open to new technology or something, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. You can just say that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. All right, your interactive question. You actually want your pitches to feel like a conversation. Whether you're speaking on a Zoom call with 30 people for 10 straight minutes, and then you're told you have 10 minutes and then we're stopped, we still want that to feel like a conversation to your listeners. Or if you're talking to somebody over coffee for an hour, it's the same content. And you want to have the same, like it's still you, Mark, being authentic, being enthusiastic, being likable and trustworthy, talking about your business. And the way to prepare for these different scenarios is back to where I talked about preparing those notes so that you have something to refer to. So as you storyboard your pitch, your narrative, and you come up with these clear message for each section of your pitch, then you can put that into notes and then adapt them. These are my notes for a 5-minute pitch. I can add more detail for a 10-minute pitch. And if I'm sitting down for a 1-hour meeting, these are my talking points. Might not even need slides. And if you're, like, let's say you're getting on a half-hour meeting with a VC who's already looked at your teaser deck, they might say, don't show your deck, I just want to talk. They'll start with a few questions and then you'll kind of work through your talking points. They might say, go through your deck for 10 minutes, and then I'll have some questions. You don't know, so you just have to be prepared for anything. But this is where setting yourself up for success and practicing that 5-minute pitch, practicing that 10-minute pitch, talking through all of your talking points, recording it, using Udly, getting feedback, all of that will help you to be prepared for any kind of situation. So good luck.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. Geeta, you have another question.
Oh,
Or hands up. Did you have another question?
yeah, no, yeah, I almost forgot. What was my question? I forgot. Sorry.
Okay, that's all right. All right, I'm going to look in the chat because there was some chat happening and I didn't have time to look at it.
I've been trying to answer the questions in the chat.
Okay.
People have
Oh,
been.
here's one. Udly is not available in the App Store. It's actually, you use it on your computer. So you have to go to app.udly.ai. I think that's it.
Yep.
To find it. So it's not a mobile app, but it's really handy. You will like it. All right. I hope you've also downloaded my handout. What other questions are in the chat? Oh,
How many
Geeta's remembered.
customers or revenue should you have prior to pitching investors?
All right, that's a totally different topic. Let's see if Geeta has a question on
Okay.
delivery and first, and then we'll go back to digging in on investor
Right. Yep.
planning.
Delivery of the pitch?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
yeah, you're preparing for delivery. But anyway,
Oh,
did you have, what is
so
your question?
what I do,
Did you have a question?
no, I don't.
Oh, your hand was up. Your hand is up.
I
Did you
know
have
it was up from before, but I forgot what I wanted to ask, so. I'm gonna
Okay,
look.
that's okay. All right, let's look at, all right, John's actually answered that one. Somebody left.
So,
Okay.
Stacia is asking for the link to your thing. Maybe you want to put the QR code up again.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry I was late. So if you
Nope.
wouldn't,
That's fine. In fact, it's in the chat, which you might not be able to see. So this is the QR code to get my handout. It's called Deliver with Impact, and it has a lot of tips on things you should practice as you're preparing your pitch. It will also, because you have to put in your email to download it, it will also add you to my mailing list. But don't worry, I only send emails out a few times a month, and only if I have something really useful to say. I promise. Okay, so do you have that?
I do. Thank you.
Excellent.
Just
And
grab
then this is the information for Udly. This is the app that I use for practicing and that all of my clients use for practicing. And one of the nice things about Udly is after you've practiced your pitch several times, you get feedback, you keep iterating. When you think it's pretty good, you can share it with somebody else. So what my clients do is they'll practice whenever it's convenient for them. It might be midnight, and then in the morning I'll get this thing, somebody shared a Udly with you, and I can look at it and give timestamp feedback. So it's really useful for getting feedback as well as practicing and getting those analytics on improving. And then if you haven't yet, connect with me on LinkedIn. And I think that's somewhere in the chat as well. Okay, so any more questions? So I really like this topic. I know that it's not like something where you have a specific question because it's not around the content, but I've seen so many cases where people really improve their pitch with getting that, by improving the delivery. And it can be very powerful. For example, I worked with one woman who's at the beginning of COVID, her fundraising round collapsed right at the end stages of it because all investors were spooked, and she was almost out of money. So she had to go back to her angel investors and ask for funding because her next round was going to be just VCs. And we practiced it. And I told her, you know what, this is so important. Just do it without slides. So she did. So she told her story with just her on the screen, no slides, about funding round collapsed, almost out of money, and her team's committed. They've reduced salaries, they've cut costs, and they have a plan. And here's the plan on getting more, closing out these customers, on getting revenue quickly. And then she put up, her only slide was about the financials. We can raise this much. This will give us this much runway to reach these customers and close out these orders. And it worked. Her angels rallied, put money in, and she saved her company. She could not have done that with a deck that she had just emailed to people and said, here's our situation. Because investors would have looked at that first 2 slides and be like, oh, funding round collapse, that's sinking, done, they're not in. But instead, she called people to a meeting and gave this amazing pitch on saving her company. So sometimes you just really need that impactful delivery that a deck cannot do. Scott, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. What's the barrier to consider whether you're pre-seed, angel, seed? And what's the barrier that we would need to lift in order to fit into those categories?
I'm going to let John answer that because it's kind of a floating number depending on industry. So I think he might have a better answer.
I have a cranky old man answer, actually.
Excellent. That's the John we love.
Yeah, thanks. The first round is you fund it from founders. The second round is your friends and family that care about you fund you. The third round is pre-seed people who are invested in the outcome in some way. The second round is seed people that are willing to plant things in with a little more faith than data. And then we get to Series A, where it's now switched from individuals to institutional money. And so almost all institutional money is writing bigger checks, and they claim to be writing smaller checks in the seed and pre-seed level. But what they're doing is they're scouting for their Series A checks. They're not writing, their thesis in general is not writing the small checks. And so there's a fundamental line at somewhere between seed and Series A, where the institutional people are doing one game and the angels are doing a different game. And somewhere in the middle there are these mission-oriented family offices that are hard to characterize, right? So we'll say Series A, B, C, that's a function of the institution, and the institutions tend to be very vertical on what they're doing. And so if you have a biotech fund, you might have a 20 million or a 40 million Series A for a biotech company kind of thing, which is very different than the 5 million Series A that you're going to get for a SaaS company kind of thing. But in the early angels, you're basically dealing with individuals spending their own money. What percentage of people who can, well, first thing, right? There's accredited investors, there's qualified clients, and there's qualified purchasers, which is 1 million net worth, 2.2 million net worth, and or asset, 2.2 million assets, and 5 million in assets. What percentage of accredited investors, those people with more than 1 million, are below 5 million in assets? Any idea?
No.
85%. So 85% of the people with money are in the below 5 million range. So my equation that I tell my angels in the angel conference is I'm willing to burn 10% of my personal wealth to invest in companies. I need to be in 20 companies, at least somewhere between 20 and 40, to have a reasonable chance of getting a good return. And so my $1 million is 100,000 divided by 20 gets me $5,000 checks. my $5 million in net worth divided by 20 gets me to 25 million or 25K checks. So if you're asking for big checks from people as individuals, right, then the percentage of people goes rapidly down. In fact, exponentially goes down, right? And so you have these different layers of angels, which are different than the layers of VCs, right? A VC typically needs 27 million in their fund in order for them to be economically viable. So the size of the VC fund matters, and that'll determine the size of their checks in many cases. So you're getting groups of investors that are typically going to write somewhere between a 5 and 25K check. Probably they should be writing more smaller checks, but nonetheless, that's probably what's going to happen 85% of the time when you pick random people out of angel groups. And then there's a small number of people that can write the 50 and 100K checks, and they're the super angels, and they write the many checks that are like that. And that's a different class of angel. So pre-seed is typically full of angels that are writing small checks that gather together, and they'll write the 100, 200K checks like we do as a group, right? And at E8, often they'll write 25K checks, and then they'll ask the company to open it up to 10K checks, and then they'll make it, you know, from the 50K, they'll make it 200K out of 2K check or 10K checks, and they'll make a much bigger number. But they're not writing millions of dollars typically.
How far along do you have to be considered seed or pre-seed, or is there a barrier before investors bucket you into different classes?
Well, yes, go back to that. What is the, is this a good team? Why this team? Team. Market size. Can this thing ever get big enough for me to care about it so that it gets scale? And does it have momentum? Is there traction? And so the quality of your traction matters. So what's your exponential growth? So we're doing adoption of a new thing. Adoption of a new thing follows an exponential curve. When it follows that exponential curve, it will have exponential growth in revenue when you've broken through the barrier of that audience cares about you.
Okay,
So-
John, I kind of want to make sure we get to other people's questions.
Thank
I
you.
also wanted to add something about the, you know, meeting those high net worth individuals. You might not meet them at angel groups. You're not going to meet them in VCs, but I'll tell you where you'll meet them. Mark, what do you think that answer is? It's probably on the golf course or where you're networking, or, you know, so meeting people with high that will write those $50,000 to $100,000 checks is kind of being in the right place at the right time. I have a client I'm working with right now, and his biggest investor is a customer who loves his product, uses his product, and he was telling him, I don't know how they managed to chat about it, that he's trying to raise money. And this guy went, oh, well, I happen to be doing okay. And he put 200K in. So finding these people requires kind of, that's a bit of luck. It's a bit of meeting in the right place, a bit of networking. And Mark, you'll probably have more luck finding high net worth individuals that want to invest in the golf industry on the golf course than you will at angel groups. Well, you just never know.
And that's why people go to the opera.
Yeah. Okay. So, next.
I see Sime has a question.
Sime.
John, I have a very quick question for you. You mentioned about momentum. So say a startup is 3 years old and last 5 months is where there is momentum. Does it mean this startup has momentum, or do you look at the entire 3 years?
Well,
How do you define?
it's often a comment that comes out of our investors when you've been what they think are just messing around, not making progress for a long time. And then you finally get progress. And then there's the question, what were you doing before and what changed and how did that happen? And when that progress doesn't look like a lot of progress, then people get uncomfortable. So they will look at the distance of it. But if you have exponential growth in your revenue for many months in a row, that will be magical for people. And that's 3 to 5% week over week, or 20 to 30% month over month growth is what you want. Percent growth, not
Okay.
not linear growth.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
So thank you so much for coming. We always appreciate Dana coming and giving talks. We've been working on a series here. Hopefully it's been useful. Our two programs for the fall are active and going. So our next set of programs will end up being in the February timeframe next year, but we'll continue to do workshops over that time period. We do have 2 seasons for angel investing. Basically fall and spring. Summer is useless and winter is also useless. So be prepared to engage people around those seasons and be able to carry your momentum into people. And as always, I think doing your customer discovery and customer development work early matters to your ability to make your startup be fundable. So pay attention to our workshops, and we'll see more of Dana as we work on growing the capacity to be invested. I see a hand up for Jaysha. Anything you want to say quickly?
I
No,
just wanted to ask if we were going to get the recording sent to us.
No, you won't get it sent to you. It'll be in the YouTube channel.
Oh, okay.
And
All right.
I
Thank you.
posted, you need to save the chat so that you can get the link to the YouTube channel.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Good luck, everybody.